Get ready to dive into the lucrative world of clam farming. Not only do clams make for a mouth-watering snack, but they also hold a secret treasure, the rare and super valuable pearls. So, what's stopping more people from jumping into this profitable business? Well, let's talk about it with Better Ask Steve. The catch. It's not as simple as throwing your line in the water, especially when you encounter Tridacna gigas, the largest bivalves on our planet. These gentle giants live life at their own pace, growing slowly but steadily to massive sizes. We're talking enormous. Now, let's put on our diving gear, because we're about to explore the tropical waters of the Indo-Pacific region. Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Malaysia, Palau, Northern Australia, the Philippines, Guam, and several Pacific island territories. These are where you'll find Tridacna gigas, living life like they own it in their cozy little underwater world. Despite how intimidating these clams look, locals value them for more than just their size. You see, in countries such as Japan, France, Southeast Asia, and many Pacific islands, the abductor muscle of the giant clam is a delicacy. It's a flavor worth seeking out, and it plays an important role in certain Asian cuisines. In China, these clams are even believed to be an aphrodisiac. Talk about adding some romance to your dinner plate. Imagine walking into a high-end boutique, but instead of designer clothes and luxury watches, you're surrounded by the world's most expensive decorative items, giant clamshells. In many illegal markets, particularly in Asia, these aren't just stunning pieces of art, they command thousands of dollars. It's not uncommon to see young clam shells casually strung around necks as jewelry or crafted into unique sculptures that double as conversation starters. The irony here is that people opt for these clams instead of ivory, a testament to their growing demand and the increasing rarity of giant clams. The issue lies in the supply chain. There simply aren't enough giant clams to meet the extravagant appetite of collectors and enthusiasts, which unfortunately fuels black market activities and puts these incredible creatures at risk. The fight against the black market demand for giant clams isn't about shutting down their entire harvesting industry entirely. There's a lucrative business at play here. Instead, innovators are turning towards sustainable solutions like clam farming. This concept was pioneered in 1984 by 8 Indo-Pacific countries as part of a joint project that aimed to cultivate these magnificent creatures on land. Fast forward 40 years, the initial group they started breeding has yet to be harvested for human consumption because giant clams grow incredibly slowly. It takes them an astonishingly long time to reach market size. The quest to turn giant clams into a food source didn't quite materialize as expected, but that hasn't discouraged innovators from trying alternative approaches. Instead of focusing on speeding up growth, they're diving deep to kick-start the breeding process. Divers collect hundreds of precious female eggs by hand during their reproductive stage. No small task considering one giant clam can release as many as 500 eggs into the ocean with a single spawning event. These eggs aren't high-tech or unique-looking. They simply resemble what we know as regular eggs under the sea and above it too. Now, let's dive into how these tiny giants grow from mere eggs to prized seafood. After carefully combining all the genetic material, farmers place these minuscule wonders in water-filled containers and patiently wait for transformation. This delicate process is crucial as the clams remain vulnerable to predators until they reach 2.5 years old. Yes, you read that right, 2.5 years. Currently, this 3-month-old clam exemplifies their miniature size. Interestingly, nature often accelerates growth when these creatures are most fragile. Every year, they add roughly an inch in length. As for their time on the farms, it depends on reaching a desirable size, typically around the dimension we see now. Generally, clams spend approximately 3 to 5 months in ground nurseries before being transferred elsewhere. Let's jump into the world where humans carefully nurture these tiny treasures. As we explore underwater nurseries, you'll notice the seafloor isn't sandy. Instead, it's packed with hundreds of baby clams fighting for survival. But worry not, humans are on the lookout to ensure their safe passage. You might have noticed those peculiar-looking buoys attached to divers' feet. These aren't just for show. They serve as a protective barrier to avoid any accidental harm to our delicate friends down there. It's a vital step considering how much damage adult clams like Tridacna and gigas can cause. In this safe haven, young clams are placed in trays, cages, enclosures, or a mix of these on a substrate. This setup provides them with a cleaner environment, shields them from predators, and makes it easier for us to keep an eye on them as they grow. Now let's dive into the fascinating world of these incredible creatures. Here, you'll find mesh cages serving as a protective shield for baby clams from predators like stingrays, turtles, and other hungry marine animals. The underwater farm landscape bears an uncanny resemblance to the iron grids often seen above Victorian-era graves. Once our tiny Tridacna and gigas reach 12 to 18 months and hit 0.8 inches in size, they're off to a new destination, much like moving from kindergarten to elementary school. As you've noticed, Steve towers over most men, but these clams dwarf him, and that's still just the beginning. Among the 13 species of giant clams, Tridactyn and Gigas reign supreme, boasting an impressive weight of up to 100 pounds and a shell length reaching an incredible 3 feet. Let's continue our fascinating journey with these massive underwater dwellers. The Tridactyn, which Steve is proudly holding, holds an impressive title. It's the second heaviest invertebrate on our planet, narrowly beaten by the enigmatic giant squid. This sea legend has captured sailors' imaginations for centuries with spine-tingling tales. As you may have noticed, these gentle giants can live up to 100 years, reaching a staggering weight of over 440 pounds and stretching around 47 inches across when they reach their prime. Now, let's dive into how these incredible creatures are raised. Once the clams mature, farmers have two options: growing them in the vast ocean or transferring them to specialized land-based pools. If opting for land, it requires advanced equipment to maintain optimal conditions, warm and clean water. Let's take a peek at what the daily life of an ocean clam farmer looks like, including diving gear and skilled professionals working under the sea. Check out these clams. They may look mature, but they're still just babies. Let's take a closer look. Can you believe by the time they reach 3 to 4 years old, their shells will be about 10 to 12 inches long? That's an incredible growth spurt. These little guys don't start reproducing until age 5, but some of them are slow growers and hit adulthood at around 9 or 10. It seems like they would have loved to hang out with mom and dad a bit longer, but life has other plans for these underwater dwellers. This baby clam is about 6 to 7 years old, and it's a real challenge for the person holding it. We're not just talking about size here. Many people believe that giant clams should be at least 10 years old, reaching lengths of around 22 inches before they hit the market. When aiming for optimal harvesting, sizes between 18 to 26 inches work best. But if you want a clam like this one, get ready to wait. It might take up to 15 years for it to mature. And hey, these clams just keep growing, reaching lengths of 27 to 30 inches by the age of 20. Now imagine being a chicken farmer who has to wait anywhere from 10 to 15 years for their birds to be ready for your dinner table, or just 5 years for one single egg to be laid. Sounds crazy, right? This is what makes the giant clam industry so unique. It's not exactly a long-term investment that anyone can appreciate, especially waiting 15 years for a profit feels like an eternity. To put things into perspective, mass production of these clams started in Palau back in the 1980s. We actually have archival footage from those early days, and let me tell you, it's quite fascinating to see how those farms were operating. Initially, everything looked promising, but over the decades, clam production took a drastic hit, leaving the industry struggling with only a handful of large clam farms still in operation worldwide today. Let's dive into the challenges of running this slow-paced and costly industry. We're talking about shellfish farming here, and it's not as straightforward as just tossing some seeds or baby clams into the ocean and waiting for them to grow. Even with direct ocean cultivation instead of nurseries, you've got expenses piling up. Renting a spot in the Pacific Ocean doesn't come cheap, nor does hiring the right team. The more skilled your crew is, the higher their expectations. And let's not forget, they need to be paid for 10 to 15 years before you even see any potential return on investment. This is no get-rich-quick scheme. It's a long-term commitment that leaves many questioning whether this business model holds water. Check out this ocean clam nursery in Bologna near the Marine Laboratory. It's home to a whopping 30,000 giant clams spread across an area equivalent to about 7 soccer pitches. You'd be forgiven for thinking that running such a massive operation would be chaotic, but let's dive into how they keep everything under control. It turns out this isn't about turning a profit. The real goal is conservation, specifically protecting these magnificent creatures from extinction. The government foots the bill for this initiative, so it's not something everyday people have to worry about in their wallets. The clam market's seen a drastic surge. Prices have skyrocketed by an astonishing 40 times. That means fishermen are earning way more than they used to. What was once 100 clamshell can now sell for a staggering 2,000. It's like stumbling upon a gold mine, but instead of gold, it's all about clams. Steve and I came across this incredible deal, a massive clamshell on sale for an unbelievable 1,000. Shells that big don't come cheap, that's for sure. We've got a real showstopper here. This colossal clamshell is almost 35 inches long and costs a whopping 1,000. Let's dive back into time. 2 pounds of dry deductor mussel used to fetch just 100 in Taiwan and Japan way back in 1989. But due to export bans in many countries, we can't pinpoint the current price. You might be guessing right if you assume it has skyrocketed because of its illicit nature. Now, on to the next hurdle: breeding these bivalves on a large scale. Surprisingly, clams simplify this process with their ability to produce genetic material from both sexes. They're hermaphrodites. So, in theory, mass reproduction should be a breeze. But we all know life doesn't work that way. There's always an unexpected twist. Let's talk about the challenges of breeding these magnificent creatures. Most shellfish experts agree that limiting their reproduction to twice a year is ideal. Forcing them beyond that can seriously harm their health. It's like shooting yourself in the foot, only worse. Harvesting clams at an early stage might seem efficient, but think about the time it takes for these babies to mature. Messing with that process would be like trying to rush a fine wine. In reality, what we need are adult clams, years or even decades old, and those aren't easy to come by. Today's farms housing such prized specimens are few and far between, and their owners won't part with them easily. So, setting up new farms, that's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You see, clam health is super delicate. It's a domino effect. If one clam gets sick, the whole farm is at risk. It's like having one weak link in a chain. If that breaks, everything comes crashing down. All those years of hard work and dedication could be gone in an instant, replaced with stress, loss, and disappointment. But before farms became the norm, there was a real crisis on our hands. Overfishing had pushed giant clams to the edge, threatening their very existence. It wasn't until people started paying attention that these incredible creatures were given another chance to thrive. In the 70s, a massive red flag waved high when it came to giant clam populations. They were on the brink of disaster. By 1976, we saw a tiny 243 tons being caught, but just 4 years later, that number exploded to a staggering 11,930 tons. You see, people love targeting adults because of their prized meat and impressive shells. But there's a big problem with this approach. When all the adults are harvested, who's left to help the species multiply? That's why many countries like the Philippines enforce strict bans on giant clam harvesting, especially in Southeast Asia where ocean protein is a mainstay for millions. However, these clams can't outrun danger since they're not exactly speed demons. And even with the bans in place, fishing still takes place due to the desperate need for food. The alarm bells were ringing loud back in the 70s when a reef assessment revealed that giant clams in the Philippines were on their last legs due to poaching, overfishing, and habitat destruction. But the 80s saw things go from bad to worse for these underwater giants, and it all boiled down to demand. Giant clams were getting more expensive due to the dwindling supply, so poachers got bolder in their pursuit, selling the prized meat for a pretty penny. In the Philippines, scientists took action by sowing baby clams on the reefs starting from 1990, hoping they'd grow into healthy adults and repopulate. But despite these conservation efforts spanning 3 whole decades, the threat of overfishing still loomed large, and it's no wonder why. Remember when we talked about clamshells as an alternative to ivory? Well, it just goes to show that even with strict laws in place, illicit activities continue. Let's switch gears and head back to the 1980s in Palau, where police made a massive bust. They caught a Taiwanese fishing boat loaded with an astonishing 500 pounds of giant clam adductor mussel, the most sought-after part of these clams. This haul was a stark reminder that even in the midst of conservation efforts, there are still those willing to take the risk and reap the rewards of this illicit trade. You won't believe the lengths these poachers went to get their hands on giant clams, literally. As police officers were unloading the seized meat from that massive Taiwanese bust in Palau back in the day, the poachers tried to change their tune with an offer of brides, but it was too little, too late for those clams. Fast forward 40 years, and the trades evolve. Now clamshells are as valuable as the meat, and law enforcement is cracking down on shell dealers. It's a lucrative business, no doubt. These shells aren't easy to hide, especially when they're this massive. Just look at these mountains of seized clams. They're towering over men, making it impossible to miss them. In recent years, there have been some jaw-dropping incidents. In March 2021, Philippine authorities made a record-breaking haul, 80 tons of illegal clamshells worth an astonishing $0.3 million. It seems like spring was definitely not quiet for law enforcement. The Philippines saw an incredible seizure in March, with locals amassing an estimated 6 months to 1 year's worth of work. That's right, 80 tons of giant clamshells valued at a whopping $0.3 million. Just a month later, another massive haul occurred, over 200 tons of fossilized shells, now valued at nearly $5 million. It's clear the allure of these clams goes beyond their meat and impressive shells. They could potentially contain one of nature's treasures, pearls. Check out this astonishingly large pearl, weighing an incredible 75 pounds and valued at around a jaw-dropping $100 million. You're looking at a record breaker that's far removed from your typical pearl. This colossal gem weighs in at 75 pounds and is a bit on the uneven side, with an appearance that somewhat echoes whale vomit. As for its price tag, you'd be surprised to know it's worth $100 million. This massive pearl, which incidentally holds the world record for being the largest ever discovered, was kept hidden away from the public eye for a decade before finally surfacing. The fishermen who found it initially treated it more like a good luck charm, displaying it in their home rather than showcasing it to the world. Had they left it under their pillow, perhaps the tooth fairy might have even swung by. Before this stunning 75-pound pearl shattered records and sent shockwaves through the world, there was a 14-pound record holder worth $5 million from a colossal clam. Let's be honest, pearls don't exactly rain down from the sea like fish food at an aquarium. They're rare. While oysters are often credited as the main pearl producers, these precious gems occur in fewer than 10,000 cases out of every 10,000. The process is fascinating. Usually a tiny intruder like a grain of sand makes its way into the shell and triggers the oyster's defense mechanism, resulting in a beautiful layer of nacre to coat the unwanted visitor. So what could have possibly slipped into that massive clam? A skateboard, maybe. The misunderstood giant clam, is it a snack-sized monster or just a misunderstood creature? Let's dive into this legend and see why we have this preconceived notion. The fears surrounding these massive bivalves may stem from folklore in regions where they thrive, painting them as aggressive beings that could allegedly munch on anyone daring to approach. However, appearances can be deceiving. Those tooth-like projections are merely part of their anatomy, not signs of an insatiable hunger for human snacks. Clam legends have made their way around the globe through stories from the South Pacific, painting a picture of these creatures as sneaky predators lurking beneath the surface. A Polynesian tale tells of a clam biting off a monkey's paw, while in Maori folklore, one nearly snags an unsuspecting canoe. The fear factor even reached early 20th century readers via Popular Mechanics magazine, which warned that divers who accidentally strayed into these underwater monsters could find themselves held with such force they couldn't free themselves and would eventually drown. But what's really amazing is that these terrifying tales about giant clams aren't even based on reality. There's no concrete evidence to back up these stories. Not a single confirmed case of a clam harming anyone, whether it's a stingray or another fish. The US Navy took these myths seriously enough to create a guide for divers warning them about the dangers of being eaten by these underwater monsters. And because of this enduring legend, scuba diving manuals have included tips on how to escape a giant clam's grasp for years. These practical suggestions range from using a knife to carefully slice between the clam's valves at its weaker point. So let's bust these myths wide open literally. Clams aren't carnivorous creatures and don't feast on fish or divers. They are filter feeders that consume plankton and other microscopic food particles, making a meal out of tiny algae instead of a diver in distress. Now, those powerful clam valves get a bad rap too. They do close fast, but not in an instant. You'd need to leave your foot or hand stuck inside for hours before you'd even have a chance to worry about getting trapped. And good luck trying to force them open, because clams usually shut tight when threatened. It's like trying to pry open a stubborn jar that just refuses to budge. Let's get real. Why would you want to cultivate giant clams when there are plenty to harvest right from the ocean? Well, for starters, it's against the law to just go ahead and grab them. But even if we overlook that red flag, consider this: every time we take a clam without being careful, the delicate balance of its reef home gets shattered. Clams are like part of the furniture there. They've been growing in place for decades, blending seamlessly into their surroundings. But when people come along and yank them out, it's not just the clam that suffers, the entire reef is damaged piece by piece. Take a look at what's happened in the South China Sea, where over 40 square miles of precious coral reefs have been destroyed because of giant clam poaching. Some of the most biodiverse habitats on Earth, gone in an instant. Imagine you're at an underwater party where every guest is here for a reason. But when someone starts tearing down the venue, everyone has to leave. That's what happens on damaged reefs. As they lose their structures and vital inhabitants like giant clams, it gets harder and harder for other species to survive there. It's like turning off the lights at midnight. Suddenly, everything that was living and thriving is now scrambling to find a new place to hang out, leaving behind an eerie silence. But here's something even more surprising: these gentle giants are actually underwater vacuum cleaners. They feed on algae and sediment, keeping their reef home spotless and healthy. Without them, the party just gets messier by the minute, with algae taking over and suffocating everything else. Let's dive into what makes these underwater powerhouses so valuable. They're essentially giant vacuum cleaners, filtering the water as they snack on plankton and algae, keeping their reef home spick and span. Without them, the party gets out of hand, with algae taking over and suffocating everything else. Giant clams act like the backbone of a coral reef, providing shelter for sea sponges, snails, young fish, and seaweed, an ecosystem within an ecosystem. But poachers don't care about that. They're after those 2,000 worth of clams. Their actions have been caught on camera before, revealing the harsh reality behind their destructive quest. Imagine watching as boats with engines roaring are deliberately driven into the delicate coral reef. propellers spinning wildly to shatter nature's masterpiece. The damage is immense. Entire sections of the reef are torn apart, and if that wasn't enough, these ruthless poachers then deploy powerful vacuum cleaners to suck up their prey and everything around it, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. But there's a darker side effect. The sediment they stir up creates massive clouds that suffocate coral and marine life by blocking out precious sunlight. It's an underwater apocalypse. The ocean's delicate balance hangs in the balance. Without sunlight, photosynthesis grinds to a halt and marine life begins its desperate fight for survival. The poachers, seemingly oblivious to the devastating impact of their actions, continue their destructive quest for profit, leaving authorities racing against time to keep up with their nefarious schemes. It's an ongoing battle that dominates headlines worldwide, but we won't let it fade away. Stay tuned for more.